The genetic tax. It wasn't a conversation, it was a climate. You grew up in a house where money was a source of static electricity, invisible, but you felt the shock every time you touched something you wanted. Your parents didn't talk about debt. They spoke in a code of, "not this month," and "we don't need that." Instead of a coffee can, there was an old, heavy ceramic jar tucked away in the back of the pantry, behind bags of flour and sugar. It was filled with crumpled bills and loose change, an anxiety fund that never grew, but only waited to be depleted by the next broken radiator or dental bill. This jar was your entire financial education. It taught you that money isn't a tool for expansion, but a temporary stay of execution. It sat there in the dark, a silent monument to the belief that the world is a place where things only get taken away. You learned that wealth was a finite resource, and your only job was to lose it as slowly as possible. Nobody sat you down and said you were poor. It was quieter than that. It was the way your mother's hands would subtly shake when she looked at a letter from the bank. It was the way your father would suddenly go silent and look at the floor whenever someone mentioned a vacation. It was the unspoken understanding that people like you didn't end up with more than what you were born into. You absorbed this before you could even read. You learned to see ambition as a dangerous form of arrogance. You wore the same worn-out jacket for 3 seasons and got very good at pretending it was your favorite style. You learned not to ask for things, not because your parents were mean, but because the look of quiet defeat on their faces was a price too high to pay for a toy or a school trip. That look taught you everything. It taught you that wanting more was a betrayal of your family's survival. For a long time, you believed the ceiling was invisible because no one ever pointed at it. They didn't have to. You just grew until you hit it, and then you stopped, because that's what everyone you loved had done before you. You didn't just accept the poverty of your bank account. You accepted the poverty of your imagination. You became a prisoner who didn't even know there was a gate to unlock. The fracture doesn't happen with a shout. It happens with a whisper in a room where everyone else is asleep. You're 20, or maybe 24. The age is irrelevant, but the sensation is unmistakable. You're staring at a screen in the middle of the night, the blue light etching lines into your face, and you stumble upon a crack in the reality you were sold. You see a roadmap, a strategy, or a person who started in your exact coordinates and moved the boundary line. In that moment, a single thought enters your mind like a cold blade. The ceiling isn't a law of nature. It's a habit of the bloodline. This thought is the beginning of a long, quiet divorce from everything you've ever known. You decide to opt out of the script, and you quickly realize that your ambition is viewed by your circle not as a virtue, but as a threat. When you try to explain what you're building, your family doesn't offer encouragement. They offer reminders of reality. Your cousin mocks your late nights over a beer, calling you delusional until the room goes quiet. Your mother's concern feels like a cage. She wants you safe, and in her world, safety means staying small. Your community has a built-in immune system. It identifies anyone trying to leave as a foreign body and attacks with the most effective weapon it has: ridicule. They try to shame you back into the herd because your progress makes their stagnation look like a choice. So you learn to go underground. You enter the ghost years. This is the part of the journey that never makes it into the motivational montages because it's repetitive, ugly, and profoundly lonely. You are working a job that drains your soul to fund a vision that currently looks like a fever dream. You spend 3 years in a state of exhaustion that sleep cannot fix, a bone-deep fatigue that becomes your new normal. Your friends stop calling. It's not a dramatic falling out. They just stop expecting you to say yes to the bars, the games, and the wasted weekends. You tell yourself the isolation is a strategic sacrifice, but it still tastes like salt. You watch from the sidelines as everyone around you settles into a normal life, weddings, promotions, vacations, while you are stuck in a cycle of failed launches and broken models. You've become a ghost in your own social circle, present in the group chat, but absent from the memories. Then comes the real test, the humiliating loss. You put 8 months of savings into a project and watch it disintegrate in a weekend. You sit in the dark with a specific, gut-punching number in your bank account, and the voice of that old ceramic jar in the pantry becomes a roar. It sounds like every person who ever told you to know your place. It tells you that the data is in, and the data says, people from your street don't do this. You don't get up because you're a lion or a warrior. You get up because you've spent enough time at the starting line to know that the air there is poison. You've burned the floor on the other side of the wall. There is no version of you left that fits back into the old house. You keep going because moving forward is the only way to keep the walls from closing in. Something is changing. You're becoming harder, quieter, and more distant from the people you love. You can feel the engine starting to catch, even if the world can't see the smoke yet. You've traded your belonging for a chance at a different ending. The echo of 7 figures. The first real win doesn't arrive with a fanfare or a victory lap. It arrives on a completely ordinary Tuesday at 2:14 p.m. while you're sitting in a chair that still creaks. It's not the million yet, but it's a number. Let's say $80,000 in a single month. That would have felt like a lottery win to the version of you from 3 years ago. You stare at the dashboard of your account for longer than makes sense, waiting for the refresh button to snatch it away, waiting for the error message to appear. But the numbers stay. For the first time, you realize that the ceiling isn't just cracked. You've actually stepped through it. You close the laptop and walk into the kitchen. The silence in the room is deafening. This is the part they never tell you about success, the profound, disorienting lack of someone to tell. You want to pick up the phone and call your father, but you realize you don't have the vocabulary to explain this without it sounding like a foreign language. To him, $80,000 is the price of a house or a decade of labor. To you, it's just fuel for the next trade. If you tell him, the gap between you won't just be financial. It will become a canyon of misunderstanding. So you say nothing. You let the wind sit in your chest like a secret weight, realized but unshared. Then comes the crossing. The day the balance hits 7 figures, $1 million. You thought this moment would feel like the top of a mountain. You thought your nervous system would finally let out the breath you've been holding since childhood. Instead, it feels like standing in an empty cathedral. The air is cold, and every thought you have echoes. You check the account, log out, log in again. The digits are there, tied to your name, tied to the kid who used to wear the same 3 shirts on rotation. It's no longer a dream, it's a ledger. You realize that becoming a millionaire hasn't ended your financial education. It has just graduated you into a much more dangerous classroom. Suddenly, you're not worried about making it. You're terrified of holding it. You start seeing threats you didn't know existed: tax jurisdictions, asset protection, and the predatory nature of a system that loves to eat the newly wealthy. You grew up in a house where planning for the future meant making sure the car had enough gas for Monday. Now, you're forced to think in decades, in legacies, and in the terrifying math of risk. The money has solved every physical problem you've ever had, but it has revealed a psychological one that is far harder to fix. You realize you've outgrown the emotional language of your home. You're standing on one side of a river, and everyone you love is on the other. You can see them, you can wave at them, but the current of your new reality is so strong that you don't know how to cross back over without drowning them in your change. You're rich, but you've never felt more like an immigrant. You've reached the place everyone said they wanted to go, and you're the only person there, standing in a silence that money can't fill. The architect of the sky. The transition to the final level doesn't happen in a boardroom. It happens at a dinner table in the house where you grew up. You go home for the holidays, and for the first time, you don't just see your family. You see the layers of financial sediment that have settled over them for decades. You notice the smell of the walls, a scent of stagnant air and old habits that you stopped noticing when you lived there, but now hits you like a physical wall. You realize that while you were out remapping your reality, time inside these walls simply folded in on itself, preserving the same fears and the same limitations. The gap isn't about the car you parked outside or the clothes you wear. It's about the way you think. You realize that you've lost people who haven't even left your life. There's no confrontation, no dramatic exit. It's just a gradual drift, like two boats that were once tied together, but you've quietly let out miles of rope. You pay for the entire family dinner and say, it's nothing. And for a split second, there is a micro silence, a flicker of resentment masked as gratitude. They don't know how to talk to the version of you that doesn't need saving. And you don't know how to tell them that your problems now, protecting capital, scaling systems, managing the gravity of your choices, would sound like science fiction to them. You are no longer a participant in their struggle. You are a benefactor. And that is the loneliest promotion in the world. Then comes the weight. You realize you are the first. In your bloodline, wealth always stopped at the person who earned it, because nobody knew how to build the architecture to carry it forward. You didn't just earn money. You inherited the responsibility of ensuring it doesn't vanish. You're building the blueprint while living inside the construction site, learning the laws of preservation that your ancestors never had the luxury to study. You look at your children, or the children you'll have, and you feel a strange, protective paranoia. You want to give them the sky, but you're terrified that by removing the ceiling, you're also removing the friction, the hunger, and the fire that made you. You want them to have the foundation, without losing the soul that was forged in the climb. You realize that generational wealth isn't a number in a trust fund. It's a different starting line. You are the one who took the genetic tax of shame and fear and paid it off in full, with interest. The old ceramic jar in the pantry is gone, replaced by structures and assets that your grandmother couldn't have imagined in her wildest dreams. You've moved the fight from the physical world into the strategic one. In the quiet moments before the world wakes up, you feel it, the weight of being the anchor. You didn't do this for the applause or the validation of people who doubted you. You did it so the next person with your last name never has to look at a menu from right to left or calculate the cost of a basic emergency. You broke the ceiling and made it the floor. They will look up and see only open sky, never knowing how much it cost you to clear the clouds. They will think this freedom is normal, and that is your greatest achievement. The view from here is heavier and lonelier than you ever imagined. But as you watch the sunrise, you know one thing for certain. You wouldn't trade this burden for any version of easy.